Philipp, welcome at the family. Very glad to have you today. Maybe as a Kickstarter, you can present what is AngelList and who you are and how did you join and when and for what. So that will be a great introduction to start.
Very short, right? Yeah. Okay, thanks for having me here. I gotta say this place is I could say it's the coolest startup space I've ever been to, and I've been to a lot of startup spaces all over the world. This is fucking awesome. So thanks for having me. Thanks for coming over. Having a great day so far in Paris. And yeah, why am I here? What am I doing? How did I get to do this thing? As you said, I worked at SeedCamp for 4 years, ran the Accelerator program and built it up. Basically, when I joined, there were 2 people running, an ad hoc investment program that happened once a year, and we really turned that into what SeedCamp is today, investing in 20 to 30 companies a year, building a very strong network in the US, and I was lucky enough to basically be able to build whatever I wanted to, which was I wanted to build my own network in the US because I thought that was the most useful for me and for the startups, so I could do that. And I could help pick the companies that I thought could best benefit from SeedCamp, so I did that. And why did I get involved in this thing in the first place was I wanted to help startups raise money, build their business, and do what they do easier, more effective, faster, etc. Because I saw how many people struggled with all these things, hiring people, managing a small team, managing that team when it grows, and you know how hard fundraising is in Europe. So felt like a very natural evolution to join AngelList, and I was in touch with Naval, Nivi, and Ash, one of my colleagues, for a long time while I was working at SeedCamp. And then at one point I decided I wanted to do something new, and then it was a phone call away to chat with those guys about this opportunity. AngelList is the social network for startups. It's the platform for startups where all of you, how many of you are founders? Great. All of you who are founders can find great talent, engineers, designers, other people that want to join startups. You can find the best investors in the world. You can talk to them and get them to invest in your company. And for all of you who are not founders, it's a great way to find co-founders to start a business, so you are founders. It's a great way to find jobs in great startups, and obviously to find out what's happening in the startup space. It literally started as a blog, so there was no one who had this massive vision for we need to build AngelList, the platform for startups. The idea was funding is hard, and how do you do it? Negotiating with VCs is very hard. How do you do it? So Nivi and Naval wrote a blog called Venture Hacks, and everybody liked that blog because it, instead of a VC telling you what a standard term is, which obviously is a shitty idea to ask a VC what a standard term in a term sheet is, you had some previous founders who would say, this should not be in a term sheet. And if someone wants to put the option pool in your allocation and not take it from the post-money valuation, then that's screwing you over. And this is how Naval and Nivi explained to founders what was going wrong. That grew into, hey guys, thanks for telling me how I should raise funds, but who should I raise funds from? Because that's really the more important answer, the more important question. So the List of Angels was born, which was basically a blog post on Venture Hacks that says, here's Mark Andreessen and here's his email address. Here's Dave McClure and here's his email address. And guess what? They didn't really like that. So that blog post went down pretty quickly. But apparently there was this demand. So they started coding, building a very simple platform. Then over the years, from 2011 to 2013, that generated a couple $100 million of investment offline into startups where investors met startups on AngelList. And then last year we launched Syndicates, which lets an angel investor take all their friends and ask them to co-invest with him, and then speak for that larger amount of money and invest that into a startup that he likes, which for himself obviously means a better negotiating position. He can earn some carry on that money, but also for the backers, this means they get access to great deals because people like Jason Calacanis, Gil Penchina, Naval, our founder himself, Brad Feld, have an incredible deal flow, and for normal angel investors, it's very hard to get access to that. So they like that. And they're very happy to pay a little bit to the lead. And the startups obviously don't have to talk to 15 people, but can talk to one guy who has a little bit more money now. So we launched that, and long story short, that's what I'm bringing to Europe. The hiring, where you can find a good job, the syndicates where lead investors can invest in your company, and where you, if you're an angel investor, can co-invest with other great investors into some of the best startups around.
So something that surprised me, you are not using the crowdfunding word to introduce AngelList. Is it something that you don't define yourself as?
Yeah, we don't really do crowdfunding because the crowd is not investing on AngelList. People who invest on AngelList are, and I was really surprised when I joined and saw those numbers. More than 60% of people who back other syndicates are founders themselves. So people who have made money building businesses, who know what they're talking about, who know how angel investing works. And it's not some random person who made a bunch of money and says, startups are the rage. I want to put some of my money in that asset class. It's actually people who know what they're doing. And the backers of the syndicates very often bring with them, great depth of contacts, knowledge in an industry, and all this stuff that we didn't expect. So also, everybody who is investing on AngelList is an accredited investor by SEC standards, which is a really annoying rule in the US that if you want to invest in non-listed securities, you need to earn more than $200,000 or you need to own more than $1 million in assets. So those are the people that can invest on AngelList. It's not the wide crowd. And actually, this is one of the areas where Europe is far advanced in comparison to the US, the area of crowdfunding. And this is actually also an area where France is far advanced of many other European countries in terms of what is allowed and what is possible for crowdfunding platforms and investors who want to invest in startups via platforms in general.
Great. Well, one of the most common questions I have with startup I see here at the family during office hours is why I should go on AngelList and why should I build a profile, because there is no community of French investor. So two questions in one. What will you say to founders that is interested to build a profile, and on the other end, what are you planning to build this investors community on AngelList to bring traction to local founders?
Both very good questions. I have at least one good answer, I think. So one of the things about AngelList as a platform and why we don't want to be the crowdfunding platform or the hiring platform, we want to be the place and not we want to be the place where startups can take care of their high value transactions. This is stupid wording. So basically everything that's important to a startup, we want to make easier and better. So hiring is extremely important to startups. That's why we built the talent platform. And fundraising, again, is extremely difficult. That's why we want to make fundraising simpler. Why should you be on AngelList? Well, if you are on AngelList, you can, first of all, tap into the pretty amazing network of developers. This is actually, if you don't tweet about it, this is actually good for you, because there's about 600 or 700 developers who are either in Paris or looking for work in Paris on AngelList. Not a lot of people know that. That's why it's easy to find good people. A lot of the engineers and designers on AngelList have been founders themselves, have been in companies early themselves. So it's something you can do whenever. It doesn't have to be when you're actually fundraising. It doesn't have to mean that you need to know all the really important people. You can just reach out and hire those people. So I think that's one very important reason. Why should you have an AngelList profile in the first place? Like with any social network, if you think that at one point you're going to use it, you should put some energy in maintaining a good profile. So, you know, a Facebook profile or a Twitter profile or a LinkedIn profile doesn't help you much if you only tweet when you have something really urgent to say, because you will have no followers, you have no engagement with your community. Likewise on LinkedIn, if you know you never build your LinkedIn profile and suddenly you're out of a job and you're looking for a job and you don't have a network on LinkedIn, you're not going to find a job on LinkedIn. So on AngelList, if you don't have a profile that's well taken care of, that you work on and you know engage with the investors and your customers and other companies, then when you do go fundraising on AngelList, you don't have a network, so it can't be utilized to the potential that it could be otherwise. So that's the easy part, in many words. The hard part, how do we want to build the communities locally? So first of all, obviously, making sure that you guys get something out of AngelList is the simplest way for me to make sure good angel investors come onto the platform. If you guys are on the platform as founders and you engage with it, then an angel investor will say, well, look, there's a lot of good companies here, and I want to meet the companies on AngelList because it's easier, it's faster. I can look at 20 companies over the course of an hour or two because they have great profiles. I know what they're doing. So working with founders to have great profiles, to have successful fundraising campaigns is step one. Obviously, bringing on lead investors for the syndicates once we have them is number two, and then making sure that whatever the feedback from the community is really taken care of. That's why we actually put people in the ground on Europe and don't just do everything from San Francisco.
What do you think is the best way to build engagement on your profile? Because you're talking about engagement, but it's not like on Twitter where you can tweet every hours. Well, what will be the very simple advice you can give any founders in this room to build the kind of engagement that will make their profile aware?
This is really simple, and I'm baffled by how many people get it wrong. Just have a complete profile. Number one, tag everyone who works at your company, who is an investor in your company. Build your own profile. Say where you've worked, what you've accomplished. Just make it interesting to read. Don't boast and brag too much. If you're funny, be funny. If you're not really, or if you don't know if you're funny, don't be funny. Just have something interesting that tells people what you do, what your startup is all about. My personal opinion is, don't be afraid to share more than you are comfortable sharing. So, share some traction numbers, share some revenue numbers maybe. The only people, we have the saying, the only person that gets hurt by bad traction numbers, or the only thing that gets hurt, is the founder's ego. Investors that want to invest in your company, when they want to invest in your company, they will know all the metrics. So you might as well just tell them up front. But if you show them the metrics and you can show growth month over month over month, that's a lot of engagement.
That's an interesting point, because it's one of the pain we try to solve at the family. I try to explain to the founders that they should publish their traction, whatever confidentiality they think they have, because very good traction is well known and information is going wild. And what will you say about the confidentiality? Because I'm not sure it's more on the other side when they have extraordinary traction. And we'll leave a story together about
well,
that.
if there is extraordinary traction, you will talk about it. I think for an investor, and I experienced this 6 years being on the investment side, it's really frustrating not to know what the traction is, and it's extremely annoying to read obvious vanity metrics. If you are an e-commerce company, if you're an e-commerce company and you tell me about how many monthly visitors you have, and you don't tell me how much they buy or what the conversion is, that's completely useless to me. And that only tells me, if 1 million people come to this site every month, and he doesn't tell me how many of them are actually buying something, that number is probably embarrassing. So I assume the worst. If you put a number there, I can actually say, this is not too bad, or this is within industry standards, that's pretty good, or if it's pretty low, I might think this is pretty low. I think it could be higher looking at how the page is built. But I get a more complete picture of what is going on. The thing, I think the number one reason why people don't want to share information about their startups is their competition. And if your competition wants to know the kind of money you make, the kind of downloads you have, they will know. That's the funny part. The people you don't want to know are the first people who usually find out, because they actually care about finding out. No one else cares about finding out, so you might as well tell them.
You talk a lot about the talent platform. I'm not. Just a question: who knows that you can hire on AngelList? Okay, so it start to. You see, it's not well known yet. Yeah. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that, and I have a few questions for you. So maybe you can explain, because there is a matching logic behind this talent that works very well.
Yeah. So I call it the talent platform, and I didn't know the name talent platform when I joined AngelList, and I was really surprised what was going on. And talent is actually a product that doesn't just tell you how interesting AngelList as a network of people is, but to me it told a lot about how AngelList as a company works internally. And so I'm going to tell you a little story. Talent is basically a way for every person in AngelList to say, I might be interested in a job, or to say, I'm actually looking for a job right now. And you have your specific profile that is not your normal AngelList profile, that obviously your employers won't see. You know, where you can say what your skills are, what your experience is, where you worked, what you worked on. And then for founders, it's an easy way to hire talent in a way where you don't have to look through hundreds of CVs, et cetera, et cetera. And I didn't know how well it worked until a couple of seed camp companies like found their co-founders through it. One company hired 8 people through it in London. I was like, this is actually really cool. So when I was at my first week at AngelList, I asked, like, who's building the talent platform? And Naval said, there's that guy over there in the corner. And there's literally one guy building this product that has placed more than 7,000 people in jobs, and that more than, I think, around 2,000 companies use to hire people. And it's one guy. It's not like an extra startup. And at AngelList, we call this the one-person startup. So a one-person startup is literally someone who says, I think this is an interesting problem. I'm going to build something that tests this assumption. And if I'm right, that's great. I can work on this. If I'm wrong, well, my next assumption better be better than this one. So Kian said, I think talent is like a real pain in the ass for early stage startups, because you need to pay like $200 or $300 a month on Stack Overflow jobs. You know, you have all these recruiters ramming CVs down your throat that don't even match your search profile, and it's just a pain in the ass. And Naval said, or I don't know if Naval, like the team said basically it's a shitty idea. And Kian said, well, I'm just going to build it. So he built it, and it worked. And now everybody loves Kian because he built a great product. And that's how the company works. And there's really this freedom for everyone to do this. And I think for every founder, giving that type of freedom to their team is extremely liberating for people. It will also make you keep the really good people, because the really good people want that type of independence and freedom and self-direction. So if you can give that to them, it's a great way of keeping them and keeping them happy, and probably finding good products to build. Yeah, that's how it works. And the idea is, for someone who's looking for a job, what do you want to, if you look for a job in an early stage startup, how do you want to interview? Basically, you want to talk to the founder and figure out if this thing is for real, you know, what kind of person he is. You definitely want to know how much you're going to earn, how much equity you're going to get, because, you know, you go through 7 rounds of interviews, and, you know, how many smarts fit in a smart car, and the smarties fit in a smart car, and, you know, why are manhole covers round, and all this bullshit that you get asked. And then someone tells you, yeah, the job's, you know, it's $40K a year, and you get 0.01% equity, and you're like, great, I just wasted a month of my life. So,
so that was a point to be clear with everyone. One of the biggest thing on talent is that you have to be upfront about the salary you offer and the equity. That have two virtues. The first one is that people can compare because it creates an instant market rate. Yeah. And actually we use it a lot, by the way, at the data point, and especially when people go international. So when you go international, you can zoom in a country and ask what are the salary offered on AngelList, and you have a direct, instant information. And on the other end, it's liberating for someone looking for a job or someone wanting to hire someone, because it works the other way. I saw startup offering very low salary on AngelList and getting top candidate because they offered a lot of equity, and that's the only platform where you can do that and have the right population to do that. Because if you go on monster.com and do that, you will have only people that will not understand why you are doing that. Yeah. So it works two-way around.
Absolutely. I think the same dynamic applies here. It's like the more upfront you are, the more people will self-select quickly, and the less time you waste. And as a founder, you know, you don't have a lot of time, and you just want to do everything as fast as possible. So this was just why it's built that way.
What are can we talk a little about the trends of investing, and because you have a spot where you watch a lot of things now at AngelList. How do you see the funding environment in Europe, and are you bullish or not about it?
Yeah, I'm pretty bullish. I think today nobody should not be bullish because there's a lot of people putting a lot of money into companies. What I'm not so bullish about is that usually, you know, there's a saying, you know, a growing tide lifts all the boats or something like that. You know, the water comes and the flood comes and all the boats go up, and that means everybody gets funded, which means, you know, a lot of shitty companies get funded that shouldn't get funding. You know, a lot of people have more money to pay to developers. That means developers for you will get more expensive, that your developers will be poached. You know, that means that suddenly, you know, while 2 years back in your area or in your industry you were the only game in town, suddenly there's 5 other startups copying you, doing the same thing, you know, maybe even doing the same thing better or doing a similar thing, you know, better or whatever. It just means more competition, which I think as an investor is great. It also means, you know, there's a lot of noise in the market. In general, I feel that we need these waves to build stuff that's kind of on the periphery, because that stuff on the periphery will usually be more crazy, more out there, and just more brash and brazen than someone who follows kind of the this is just about possible route. And therefore I think it's great. There's more angel money. I mean, you guys had a bunch of really big exits here in France, so I hope some of that money is coming back to be invested in you guys. You know, more money coming into funds from people who suddenly realize, I don't have any exposure to tech. So I think that's all great. There's also a lot of government money and a lot of corporate money, and the problem with that is, I mean, it's great that there is more money, but the problem with that kind of money is usually when things go sour, that's the first money that evaporates. And so, you know, corporate accelerators, corporate investors, VC funds, yeah, all this stuff is usually the first thing that leaves, and that makes a natural dip that much harder, because someone says, oh, I'm getting cold feet, I'm out of here, and then all of a sudden, you know, you're talking to people who don't actually invest anymore, and you waste your time, yada, yada. So I think that's a danger you need to be aware of. But otherwise, it's looking good. More people from here are going abroad. Actually,
yeah, let's zoom on that, because that was my next point, and I think we can just share a data point. 20 company fundraise in the family on the first year. 16 of them fundraise in the US.
Awesome.
And they stayed in Europe. Do you see this kind of thing more and more happening often?
Absolutely.
And especially through AngelList, by the way. So.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There's definitely more US investments coming this way. We actually talked about this yesterday in Berlin with a bunch of investors. By now, there's actually, so 10 years ago we didn't have a tech ecosystem to speak of. You know, there's maybe some people in the room who were around 10 years ago, and they say we had a great ecosystem back then, but I mean it's not comparable to today, right? There wasn't the level of, there wasn't the amount of seed stage companies, there wasn't the amount of A-backed companies from international investors, and also there weren't, you know, the huge IPOs of today. And the same thing applies for Paris, same thing applies for Berlin, for London a little bit less because they had a strong tech scene before, definitely Stockholm, Finland. So all of this suddenly makes the whole continent much more investable for angel investors and later stage investors. So I think that is amazing because it will build, so the more B and C round companies we have here with more international investors, the more demand there is from these international investors to, you know, not play kindergarten and grow up, build an international business, build that C-level management team that suddenly can go from 50 to 500 to 1,000 people, which is all things that we haven't had in the ecosystem. And that is, I think that is the real difference between here and Silicon Valley. It's not founders having great ideas at the early stage or angel investment and stuff like that. Obviously, that's part of it. But the real difference is when you go from 50 to 500, and in the Valley, you can pluck these people from the shelf. You're like, I'm building an ad company. You know, I want to change the way ads are being delivered. Well, Google just picked these people from Yahoo. Facebook picked these people from Google. And now whoever's coming next will just pick these people from Facebook. And these, you know, these guys have done it again and again and again, and they obviously go higher and higher in the hierarchy as well, but you just don't have that here. You have these people from large corporations, media companies, et cetera, but they don't have that startup experience, and that we're building that, I think, is amazing.
Let's go a little deep on Google Venture. That was a big surprise of the year. Google Venture is coming to Europe. What is your personal opinion, and do you think that in a certain sense launching in Europe for AngelList was in the same trend, and do we will see a lot of Valley investor coming to Europe?
Well, I think, so why, I didn't cover this before, why did we decide, or why did the team, I didn't decide because I tried to convince them to decide, why did we decide on covering Europe? The ecosystem is connected already, and you know, stuff is going on here, and if you are a social network or a platform for startups, you need to be everywhere. So that's why we did it. Very simple. It was stupid not to do. I think for people like Google, I mean, Google Ventures is a very untypical VC. They are a big investor in AngelList and have been quite supportive. And you know, the types of investment they've done, what, like 300 million in Uber, and like 50 or 60 in Nest, and then, you know, they bought Nest. Surprise, surprise. This stuff, like, that's not very normal. How prolific they are at seed stage in the Valley, or were at seed stage for a while in the Valley, was also very surprising. The kind of people they employ is very surprising. The kind of people they picked for the team in London is very surprising. I mean, I think it's a great team. I love all these people that are on that team, but they're very atypical for a venture fund. And I think that's good, because that means it can change the way the industry works. It will mean that other types of companies will be funded, and that the support they will give is different than what other people can give. And as a corporate VC, you need to really play that game, because if you play the same old corporate VC game, you're not going to be successful. So yeah, I think that's very positive. I think for for a company like Google, they have all the support structures of HR. They have all the designers, product managers, and ad specialists that help the portfolio companies. And they have that in London. They have that in the Valley. For a partnership to expand internationally, I think it's extremely difficult. So if you look at the most successful venture firms, usually it was between 5 and 10 people in one office. And a good venture firm has a solid thesis, has a shared approach of what to invest in, and that is much better to manage when you're in a single office. So Union Square Ventures, Spark in New York, Spark Capital in Boston, first round now mostly in San Francisco, Foundry Group in Boulder. Those are all people that sit in the same room. They really know what the other person is thinking. So that's extremely hard to really internationalize.
Talking about something a little controversial, I remember a time where on AngelList they try to manage feedback about investors. There is a lot of lists going in the valley spreadsheet where people put nasty feedback. Now we have secret where people can say what they think about investor. What is the position of AngelList about that? Can you share with us? Do you have any idea of why these have been stopped and how the feedback is structured and managed?
We still have feedback on the.
Now it's public, so you can. So
yeah.
It's only good feedback because, of course, no one is fool enough to go and say this investor is shitty.
Yeah, I mean, you really have to figure out what is important to you as a company, and for us, what is important is that deals get done, startups get financed, and that just didn't really add a lot of value, I think. What I do think is, and I think it's extremely important that stuff is being talked about more. That's why Venture Hacks was started in the first place. It's very difficult to be the aggregator of bad news. Like, that's not really a good place to be, or that's not really a good, I don't know, identity to have. So I think things like secret are an evolution of what is going on already. So social media, blogging, all the conferences and events that we have, everything's being videotaped, everything's being broadcast. That makes investors more honest, and that makes everybody more honest. I mean, that makes founders more honest, and it's really a lot harder to screw people over because of it, and I think that's a really, really good thing.
Just to ask you if you can expand a little bit on where are you in creative syndicates in France?
Yeah, great question. It's actually a hard question.
And it will be Europe syndicate or country by country?
Yeah, so I won't share timings. I won't share what exactly we're going to do because we don't know ourselves yet. It's very difficult to do something that's pan-European. What I want to say is, this is the problem for us, and I didn't expect this. The problem for us is really that the European Union and the European Commission are not strong enough in driving a regulated approach across Europe. So there's a bunch of regulations from how does an investment in a French, a German, a UK, a Dutch, a Spanish, Portuguese company work in the first place. So how do legals get done, and what is actually possible from securities law in a particular country? Then you have things like what is normal for investors to invest in, and what is founder friendly as a structure that is easy enough to raise money with. And then you have things like financial promotions, general solicitation, which is really something that nobody in the startup ecosystem has ever thought about. Because this is stuff that regulates how big banks, insurance companies can sell their products. And obviously these guys, have a bit deeper pockets to manage that kind of regulation. So this is really something that's very challenging for us. We obviously want a product that works as similar as possible across the world. So, we don't want to have German syndicates, French syndicates, Dutch syndicates, UK syndicates. So we're definitely working on an international solution, or at least solutions that make the product as international as possible. We want to continue to bring international money into international companies. So, we don't want a UK company only to raise from UK angels. Yeah, and when are we going to launch it? I won't tell you that because that's just going to put a bunch of pressure on me that I don't want because it's not in my hands. It's really in the hands of the regulatory bodies in the countries that we work in.
Just wondering if the Chinese or Asian investment ecosystem is somehow connected to Europe, because I know they are connected to the States already.
Yeah. So how they are connected, or
if they are connected?
Yeah, they're somewhat connected. There's a bunch of corridors that are quite interesting. So you obviously have a UK Hong Kong corridor. You have a pretty strong Netherlands Singapore corridor. Obviously, in the US, you have a very strong corridor because of manufacturing by US companies. I think in early stage, it's extremely difficult to build these kinds of connections. I also think we're doing a really bad job, not we as AngelList, but we as an investment community doing a really bad job at engaging with the Asian market, because culturally, obviously, we know exactly what's going on in the US and we understand, and that's why we go there. A bunch of my friends who started or running companies in emerging markets, have way more opportunities and way bigger opportunities than they would have back home, and I think that's underfunded. I think there's probably a pretty good bet to be made by a smart investor building stronger corridors like that. So yeah, I guess my answer is it's way too little activity that is going on cross-border. If you want to know some names that are doing a good job, I think 500 Startups is doing an amazing job connecting ecosystems. Jose Marin and Fabrice Grinda are doing a pretty good job in Brazil and South America, connecting that to the US. Golden Gate Ventures is a company in Singapore investing in seed and A, and they built some pretty international businesses. But yeah, I wish there was more of it, because there's a lot of opportunity there.
I can see a proliferation of incubator accelerators everywhere. They make kind of advertising, we are the best, come on, we're going to promote you, blah, blah, blah. But I also noticed that there is some accelerators that don't look that serious. So can you give us your advice how to be aware of that, how to avoid some mistakes? Because I read many stories.
Yeah, absolutely. I obviously have very strong opinions on the accelerator ecosystem. If you're a founder, why would you want to take money from and give equity to a bad investor? Obviously you wouldn't. So if you look at accelerators, and Sam Altman yesterday published Y Combinator numbers. I think there's like $3 billion plus companies, 20 companies that are worth more than 100 million. And I don't know, it's on the Y Combinator blog. It's pretty interesting in terms of numbers. They're so far ahead of everyone else. If you can get into YC, get into YC, right? 'Cause it's just going to make you, the likelihood that's going to make your A round and subsequent rounds more successful is pretty high. So it's just very pragmatic. Just go to an accelerator that is as best as possible for you. And then there's a handful of accelerators that are that come after that, and I think there's actually not that much difference in whether you go to 500 Techstars, Seedcamp, AngelPad. And this is all like very classic accelerator type stuff. These are the ones that have been around for 5 years or longer, where you can see some metrics, where you can see some success stats, where you know which are the kinds of founders that are involved. And yeah, I think that's always a good bet. What you really want to look at, though, is why you really want to join an accelerator, and figure that out for yourself first. So is it because you want to get some money so you can screw around and find your first product? Is it because you really want to scale and go to the next round? Is it because you want to be in Paris and be connected to this great space? What I'm saying is there are some accelerators that are now innovating this game that has been around for 5, 6, 7 years, and you guys here obviously are at the forefront of innovating that. Seedcamp just raised a $30 million fund. They're going to change the way they invest, because the old 25K for 10% doesn't work anymore. So I think it's really something where you need to figure out, what do I want out of it? and where can I most likely get it, and then start at the top, and where you get in, that tells you something about yourself as well. Okay. Oh, how do you check if the incubator is good? So the top ones, pretty easy to find out. You just see, the kinds of investments they make. I think the best feedback you can get is to ask founders who've been in the program, and this is with every investor. Right? Every investor that wants to invest in your company, you need to talk to 2 or 3 other people that person invested in. That's the absolute minimal due diligence you need to do on an investor. Ask other people he has worked with for their feedback. The best people to ask are one person who has been super successful, and ask them how much of that success comes from being part of that cohort. One person who has absolutely failed, so you can ask how have they supported that person in hard times. And one other guy that you think maybe is doing something in your industry, has a similar business model, has something that's similar to your business, so you can figure out if the right people are involved to actually help that type of business move forward. I think that's the best way to find out.
I understood that you invest in cross countries and cross activities. Would you please tell us, everybody's moving, would you please tell us in which currency you would invest in, and how you can manage the foreign exchange risk, if they are?
I think as an investor you invest, you can't choose what currencies you invest in, because you're going to invest in the currency that the startup wants that you invest in. And if you're a startup and if you're a startup here and someone's like, I really want to invest in dollars, you go to the bank and change that into euros, because you need to operate in euros, right? So I think exchange rate risk is not the type of risk as a startup that you should worry about at all, unless you build something around exchange rate risk, like a company we back with Seedcamp, TransferWise. Obviously they worry about this stuff because it's their business model, but it's much more important to worry about hiring the best people, building the best product, and not running out of cash, because you're going to run out of cash, and then it doesn't matter which currency it's in.
How do you get featured on AngelList? Because that's the most common question I receive.
Okay, how do you get featured on AngelList? First of all, you have a great profile. Everything's filled out. Someone goes to your profile and sees, wow, this is a fucking amazing company. Then you email me, philipp@angel.co. And by the way, you can all email me when you think you have an amazing profile. I'm not going to give you, so here's a rule I have. If you email me and say, hey, Philipp, can you give me some feedback on my profile, and your profile is empty, what am I going to say? Like, fill out your profile? It's not that hard. It actually says, your profile is 70% filled out. If it's 70% filled out, fill out the other 30%. And then, so that's pretty easy. I think what's important to understand is, why do we want to feature companies? We want to feature companies because we want to make sure that the best companies get seen by investors and they quickly close. We don't necessarily want to help startups who struggle closing their round, hey guys, why don't you invest in this? They're just looking for 20 more thousand euros. That doesn't really work for featuring, of course. What featuring is for is, we want to say, here's a great company, let's optimize the amount of money they can raise, how fast they can raise it, and let them get on with their business. So, if you are raising a fresh round, and start early on AngelList. Don't go to AngelList when everything else failed, because if everything else failed, AngelList will certainly also fail. Go on AngelList early. Tag all the people that are investing in your company, that are investing in this round. Tag how much money they're investing, and if you do that, I will see your company. I guarantee it. I see every company that's starting a fundraising campaign on AngelList, and if you tag a couple people that are investing in the same round, I will think very hard about featuring it.
Hi Philipp, hi Osama. My name is Mathieu and I am CEO and co-founder of Links & Go. Links & Go, this is a social network for tourist travelers that want to meet during and before their departure. So if you are going next week to Barcelona or whatever, for a weekend, for a week, for an internship or whatever, and you want to connect to new people, maybe French, German, or anyone else, you connect on Links and Go, and we provide you your future neighbors. So today we have a first prototype. We are a team of 3 people, and basically I'm asking with my team if we do some love money, or if we go on such a platform like AngelList for the first fundraising. So this is for seeds, first stage, and we are thinking something about 100,000 euros for 1 year development. So the goal is to scale, to create the community.
Did you launch yet?
Yeah, of course. And we have something like 1,500 members in 2 months.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So obviously I haven't looked deeply into what the business model is, etc. I think there's quite a few companies who do something similar.
Yeah, of course.
And I think it's very hard to convince someone off the bat that this is adding, like that this will make a lot of money, that it's adding a lot of value for an individual user. This is very often the case with consumer startups. So in that case, it's probably not going to be very successful on AngelList as the first raise, because in consumer startups, the first thing investors will look for is some traction numbers. And I mean like tens and hundreds of thousands of users, because that's very often what people now get to, you know, during an accelerator or even without investment. So if you say you're going to raise 100,000 or so, that's probably an amount of money that you can raise relatively quickly from local investors. And since the first time that you're going to spend the money on is building a product, which is hopefully something you already know how to do, you know, the quality of the investor is very important. You need someone very supportive who's done something early stage before, but you don't need super international investors for something like that when you're just going to sit down and code. It's probably more interesting then for the next round to say, hey, we've taken a very small seed round and we've actually gotten somewhere, so that you can raise a lot more money in the next round and not raise 200 or 300K afterwards, but raise like $1 million, $1.5 million.
Okay, but just to be clear, for this next round, this will be to scale or to
monetize
the service?
There's no time to scale yet. Like that's going to come way later. So scale is like millions of users. You get there when you raise the Series A. Right now, what you want to do is you want to establish for an investor that looks at your deck, your AngelList profile, or you talk to in a pitch that, hey, we are solving a problem that's really important for users, and users come back, they engage, they pay, whatever they do, 2 or 3 things that makes your product very sticky and engaging. This isn't, so as I said, this is maybe like tens of thousands of users, but they come back and they do it again. Because with 1,000 users, usually you can't.
It's early adopters.
Yeah, you can't show any trends. But investors completely understand that you can't get 1 million users without any investment, or that you can't survive for 3 years without any investment. That's totally fine. But if you can nail 1 or 2 things that people engage with early, then investors are getting interested, and then it's also a good time to go on AngelList.
Thank you.
It's very hard to be conclusive in these things. I'm very sorry.
Hi. Hi. Hi, my name is Gregory. I'm co-founder at Ding Dong, and we are helping owners selling their apartments. It's a web and local service helping owners selling their own apartments by themselves, like a professional, for free. And actually, we have We have split the process of selling an apartment in 14 steps, and we are giving at every steps help, advice, and tools. As well, there is a broker, an agent, who helps you do professional photography or making the contracts, checking the financial what's the word? The financial case of the buyers.
Yeah.
No? And I will go directly with the traction. For right now, like all the person we have met, they've been working with us. They all recommend us. We have almost sold all the apartments we are working on.
How many?
Almost 20. 78% of apartments get sold in 2 days, and 71% without any negotiation.
That is really impressive. So I think, first of all, you need a new name, because there is a company called Ding Dong, and every investor in Europe has seen it.
Oh, really?
He already changed because of that.
They actually changed their name now. It's called Tap Talk now. It's like this messaging app, but they were called Ding Dong, and every investor saw them. So when you said, I'm the co-founder of Ding Dong, I was like, no, you're not.
Wow. Okay.
Okay,
Well,
so
thank you.
simple AngelList search helps with that. But yeah, so that aside, I mean, that's not that important. I think it's actually a great name for what you're doing, because obviously the doorbell. And
Is there a weird question? Is there a sexual connotation with Ding Dong?
No.
An English friend told me that, so I'm just checking.
No, I don't think so.
All right.
I mean, there are people who can make sexual annotations out of anything, so, you know. Anyways, like, don't let that be your main problem right now. I think real estate is a very interesting industry, first of all, because obviously it's high value transactions. You already have high value transactions, which is amazing. And, you know, the speed that you mentioned is great. So I think that sounds like a winner. That sounds exactly like those early growth and traction stats where an investor would say, okay, this actually works. And someone selling their home with this, which is obviously one of the biggest transactions that any individual will make in their life. So you have that, you figured out that this actually works. I think in order to be successful with a raise on AngelList, you would probably need a strong local lead investor. But then AngelList would be very good for you to find people that know the space. So because you can pick, and what we do when we do feature a company, we pick location and market, real estate that these investors are interested in investing in. So you don't just get spammed to every user. We pick a couple hundred or a couple thousand people that we think are interested in what you do, and then that gets sent out. So I think that would be a good way to do it. Did you already get any investment or nothing so far?
We have been selling apartments with contract first for a year, so we have money for such time.
That's good. Well, then don't raise money.
No, it's not the goal for now, but now that we have switched on business model, we do everything for free to get the selling market first, before targeting the buyers after. So it's like our goal is to get the 18 arrondissements, like the market, and then try to scale at Paris. But at one point we'll need money.
Yeah.
So everything we need is what, like the traction?
Yeah. Because you're not in a consumer space where you need like millions of users. You're in a professional prosumer or whatever you want to call it space. You handle large transactions. So the question is it meaningful? And I would say if you sell your apartment through it, it's pretty damn meaningful. And scaling that in one city where, obviously there's a very heated up real estate market like here is very interesting. And because you're building a marketplace, obviously you would go for one city first. You wouldn't start London and Paris at the same time and do like a little bit of market. No, you would build one market first and then learn and apply those learnings to other places. The way I would see it is, if you can bootstrap covering Paris, bootstrap that and then raise a chunky seed round, like a 700-800K or $1 million, to go and do London and or another city, and then raise like a really big Series A to go beyond that. I mean, that's a feeling. I don't know the numbers. I don't know how big the team is, etc. But
that was almost where we were.
Yeah.
What's thinking.
I want to say one thing to the folks that I just gave advice to. Don't just take advice from one person on this. And, I might be as wrong as I might be right. You are a good founder when you know how to take advice, and that doesn't mean you're a good founder when you don't take advice. It means you need to be able to know your business so well that everything an investor, an advisor, a mentor tells you, you can dissect and put it in your mental model of what your startup is. I think that's very important, and a lot of people blindly follow, people's advice, famous people. I'm not famous, but some big investor tells you, you should really do this, and you're like, well, this guy said it, so I better do it. Might be very wrong. Try to understand why someone is saying something to you as advice, where you can put this in the understanding of your company that you have yourself.
Thank you very much.